Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Low Season Traveller Insider Guides. I'm your host, Jed Brown, founder of Low Season Traveller, and this week we're joined by Polo Sanchez-Valle, who's going to talk to us about Mexico during the low seasons. I was originally invited by Polo to join a tourism event in Mexico this week, and as a result of, well, you know what, we had to reschedule it until September. So, instead, let us bring a little bit of Mexico to you for the next 30 minutes or so as we hear from Polo on just why we should visit his home country during the low season months. Enjoy. So, a very good morning, Polo, and welcome to the Low Season Traveller podcast. Great to have you with us.
Good morning, Jed. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Fantastic. So, let's get straight in. Mexico. We were speaking a little bit before off air, and I was telling you that in my shame and in my ignorance, I've never been to Mexico before. I've traveled to about 80 odd countries around the world. I've never been to Mexico. And I'd always thought, as I'd sold Mexico, that, you know, it's Cancun, maybe it's Puerto Vallarta, but it's the beaches, and that's what there is in Mexico. Obviously, I am massively ignorant to this because I've learned a little bit since then. Give us a little bit of an overview to Mexico for people like me who possibly have never been to Mexico.
Oh, that's perfect. Excellent. No, I think that's a very good starting point because we can then start from zero and then build up from there. So, Mexico. So, as you know, obviously, it's a country. It's I think the third largest country in Latin America after Brazil and Argentina. Just to give a rough idea, it's 2 million square kilometers, so it's quite a big country. Bordered to the north by the US, and then on the south you have Guatemala and Belize. Basically we have on the east coast the Caribbean side, of course, and on the west coast we have the Pacific Ocean. Mexico has about 15,000 kilometers of coastline, so obviously it's a country very much oriented into the beach and sun destinations. But as we will speak a little bit later, there's much more to see inland. As it is a big country, I'd like to always, when I explain about something about Mexico, I kind of divide the country in 5 different regions. It doesn't mean anything. It's not geographical, official, or any division. It's just in my mind, is as I see the country, and it helps a little bit to give a rough idea of the different offerings in the different regions. So probably the first region is on the southeast of the country. The southeast is obviously where you mentioned Cancun is located, the Yucatan Peninsula is located, all the Mayan world is located, and all the culture around the Mayan world, which is all the pyramids and archaeological sites, or everything related to the Mayan world. That's one region, very popular, very well known, and very rich in terms of offerings, and really, really nice. Then there's the center of the country. Center of the country includes Mexico City, the capital city of the country, of course. And then you have all this area a little bit north of Mexico City, which includes a lot of colonial cities, colonial towns, more like Spanish-like destinations with a lot of colors and really nice food and a lot of different natural, very beautiful landscapes, and very nice. Then you have obviously the Pacific coast that we will cover a little bit later. Really long coast, many different destinations and places. Then you have the Baja California Peninsula, which is that peninsula on the Pacific coast as well. Beautiful, really, really, really nice area in Mexico as well, where Los Cabos, for example, is located, and then all the wine districts in Mexico. And then finally, you have the east coast, which is the Gulf of Mexico, which is also very, very interesting in terms of culture, music, carnivals, and very unique feeling. So yeah, that's basically the way I see Mexico, roughly.
That's it in a nutshell. I was saying at the outset, you know, for the UK market, most people, I guess, have a familiarity with Cancun. You know, Cancun, of course, with it's got fabulous beaches. You know, the color of the ocean is like something you've sort of never seen before. Let's look though across the other side on the Pacific coast. how do the beaches differ, and how does the feel of the destination differ? Is it literally just different types of beaches, but it's all the same kind of hotels and everything else, or is there a different feel completely? Talk me through the difference between both coasts, actually.
Hmm. Oh, very interesting. Yes, indeed. As you mentioned, probably the Caribbean side is quite homogeneous. Beautiful beaches, blue sea, and white sand. As opposed to that on the Pacific coast, you have a very very long coast, of course, with very different types of places. So they're not homogeneous at all. So that's the interesting part of the Pacific coast. You can see, for example, if you go to the, let's say, South Pacific in Mexico, places like Ixtapa or Acapulco, which is a little bit more known. I think the name is very well known. You have beautiful bays, really mountainous landscapes, whereas on the Caribbean side it's quite flat. On the Pacific coast, I think it's a little bit more lush, a little bit more mountainous. The landscape is a little bit different. You have all along the coast a long mountain chain called Sierra Madre Occidental, which goes almost from the border to the with the U.S. until the border with Guatemala. So it's a long mountain chain, which gives a very unique character to the Pacific coast. So you have a big mountain behind you, very large, very green, and then you have the deep blue Pacific Ocean, but very different places. So from small towns with almost private bays to long sandy beaches. You have places in the Baja California Peninsula as well, really interesting. And yeah, no, very different, very different atmospheres, even in within the Pacific coast.
And I guess with the with the oceans, once you're on the Pacific coast, I was looking before, and I think you have an opportunity for for whale watching, which obviously you're not going to have that on the Caribbean side. I wouldn't have thought, but there is. I mean, I am right in saying along that west coast, that is the route for different whales migration patterns, right?
Exactly. Yes. So we have between the months of November and March, you have that migration of whales, all sorts of whales, the different humpback whales, gray whales, even orcas that come from as far as Alaska and Canada and come to Mexico basically during the colder months. So you can find very easily whale watching spots in many different destinations from the Riviera Nayarit, Puerto Vallarta, Los Cabos, and then up north in the Mar de Cortés, the Sea of Cortés. And that's especially very interesting on the low season, of course, because it's between November and March. So it's apart from December, which is higher season. That I think we will speak about that a little bit later. But yeah, it's a very spectacular activity during the low season in the colder months, colder for uh, I mean for the whales in the north in Alaska. No? In Mexico, it's still warm. That's why they come.
So that's fantastic. I suppose you also touched there on as well that Mexico has mountains, so we're talking a lot about beaches, but I guess the terrain of Mexico is just outrageously varied as well. So you've got these Sierra Madre mountains, which I don't know how long that mountain range is, but is that the same mountain range that you can sort of see in when you see images of Mexico City? You can see these snow-capped peaks in the background. Is that the Sierra Madre?
No, that's a different one.
Okay.
Those are the volcanoes, yeah, in the central areas
Ah,
of Mexico. Yeah, Sierra Madre is more towards the coast, really. So really,
yeah.
like along the coast, the Pacific
So,
side.
so do you have volcano tours as well? I'm just wondering now.
Yeah.
Just when we talk about volcanoes, because again, that's quite interesting to a lot of people. I was in Tenerife in December at an event, and obviously you've got Mount Teide, which is this extinct volcano, which was absolutely fascinating, actually. But you've got live volcanoes in Mexico as well. Is there a form of tourism with that?
Yes, definitely. So we do have some volcanoes. Some of the tallest or the biggest are around Mexico City. So that's quite interesting for people visiting Mexico City. It's probably About 45 minutes out of the city, you have a really nice area called, well, it's difficult, I'll say it, but it's called Popocatépetl. It's an Aztec word, I guess.
Yeah.
And next to it, about 45 minutes next to the Popocatépetl area, you have the Iztaccíhuatl, which is another Aztec word. Both of them are volcanoes. I think Popocatépetl is active. The other one, I'm not sure. It's really nice, yeah. So it's very popular for hiking, and you can go up there. And well, I've never been to the top really, but I've been to like to the skirts, and yeah, really interesting. Then you have other volcanoes as well, actually on the Pacific coast, as we were mentioning before. You have a state called Colima, which is a
Uh-huh.
very small, probably one of the smallest states in Mexico, which is basically a volcano in the middle, really tall, really nice, and yeah, lots
Wow.
of volcanoes
Yeah,
around.
just an incredible amount of different sort of terrain within the same country. I suppose one of the things that I'm already thinking about, if well, I should say when I travel to Mexico, how easy is it to get between the different places? I always think that sometimes, in the UK, it's like when you're talking about going to Australia and people say, oh, I'm going to go to Sydney and to Perth, and there's no realization of the distances, and just how large Australia is. With Mexico as well, you know, it's quite a large country, right? How great are the distances? When you're choosing to visit Mexico, do you really have to zero in on a particular area and really just focus on that, and there's probably going to be more than enough for you to do? Or is it possible to have a skip around the country in 2 weeks?
Hmm. Yes, I think both options are really interesting, and probably repeating Mexico many times. One time you can do just one area, and then come back and do other areas, of course. But I would say that generally speaking, it's easy to get around the country. So obviously you have air connections between different airports within Mexico. I don't know exactly the number of airports we have, but there are a lot of airports. I would say almost every capital city in the 32 different states in Mexico has an airport, and very often they are international airports, of course, connected to the main hubs in the US. So it's very easy to get around in Mexico by air. Another option, obviously, is by coach. There are no trains, no passenger trains in Mexico. Just a couple, but they're more like tourist trains, not really transportation. So the next option is by coach, which is quite a good option as well. Obviously, the distances are high, but it's a good excuse to just stop in the middle and see many places that you wouldn't see when flying. So yes, and obviously by road as well.
Just on the subject of the buses, I'm fascinated. So I've done a few, relatively long bus journeys in South America, actually. And you're talking, sometimes there's bus journeys that are about 15 hours. It's just crazy. When we think in the UK, a long bus journey in the UK is 4 hours. And this, the kind of scale again is just something else. But I was watching recently, and I guess many of our listeners might have seen this program, Race Around the World. Have you seen this program?
Yes, I was watching
And
it yesterday actually. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, utterly fantastic. But they're traveling obviously over land, the whole length of the Americas, and that experience on the bus. For me, actually, there's something very real and authentic about seeing the destination from ground level. Now, I've worked in aviation for a lot of my life, but actually, you do miss out a lot when you stop off at these little stops on the way that possibly don't usually see huge numbers of tourists. You get to see a bit of the real destination, and of course, you're mixing with local people a lot of the time on the buses as well. I would have thought that's probably quite a cool way to see Mexico, right?
Definitely. I think that's a really nice way to see definitely Mexico. And you can even, for example, just as an example, a very popular route is between Mexico City and Cancun, let's say, that you could do. It's about 20 hours if you go straight, but why not stopping in, I don't know, you can stop even 5, 6 times as long as you want. You can stop in
Yeah.
Merida, you can stop in in Veracruz, in Puebla, in many places. You can spend the night there or even a couple of days. So yeah, no, definitely. And then you have in Mexico very different companies. So private companies, of course, buses, all sorts of buses. So you can get from air conditioning, almost like flatbed uh, seat, to more affordable options as well. So there's really an option for all types of travel that you want to do.
Would I be right in saying that the buses in general, even the relatively long haul buses, are they quite inexpensive?
They are inexpensive. Yeah, I think generally speaking, yeah, there's even compared to an airfare, yeah, it's quite affordable. I would say, yeah, and you have actually quite good service, as I mentioned. So some buses you have not many people, so I don't know how many seats, but it looks like not many seats, and then flatbeds, and so yeah, it's a good option as well.
Flatbeds. You got me at flatbeds, Polo.
I've done that. Not to Cancun, but I've done that to the central areas in Mexico. And yeah, you actually just overnight you sleep and then you wake up in, in another place.
Genuinely, I think I would take a flatbed seat overnight for an 8-hour journey rather than 2 hours in a cramped seat on on an economy or budget aircraft.
Exactly.
But that's just me.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about nature. We were talking about obviously the whale watching, which sounds absolutely fabulous, and you're on the main. It's almost the whale highway, isn't it, between the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere there, on the Pacific coast. In terms of other forms of nature, and you put this on the email to me, and I hadn't realised that Mexico has this butterfly migration.
Yes. Yeah, that's another
Now,
one.
I've seen this on. It must have been an Attenborough program, and it's the monarch butterflies, I think, right? It
Mhm.
looks out of this world. So where does that happen? When does that happen? And can people actually witness that for themselves in Mexico?
Yes, yeah, that's another really interesting one. So just to mention the whale watching and the butterflies, both of them are UNESCO natural. How do they call that? Heritage.
World Heritage. Yeah, yeah,
Yes, World
yeah.
Heritage. So in Mexico we have five of them, five natural UNESCO World Heritage. I don't know how to say
Phenomena,
that.
I guess.
Activities, phenomenon. Yeah, exactly. And I think we have 20 something of the more architectural ones,
Yep, the
plus
sites.
the gastronomy. Yes,
Yep,
exactly. So in terms of the monarch butterfly, they also come from the north. So they come from Canada. And they come in the month of November, also low season. So that's a really interesting activity to do. They go to a very specific forest in a state in the central area in Mexico called Michoacan, which is a beautiful state where actually the famous Day of the Dead comes from, and many other celebrations come from. So yeah, the monarch butterflies go there in November. So there is I think 2 or 3 weeks where suddenly in that forest there's like millions of them that come and just um, how can I say, they just take over the forest. So it's a beautiful phenomenon, very well protected. To
yep,
be honest, at the moment it's quite well protected. It used to be not that well protected, but it is now.
yep.
So they try to limit the number of people that can go in,
Good.
and you have the special paths where you can just go and see them, and it's beautiful. Yeah, really nice.
Awesome. What are any of the other natural kind of phenomenon that you have?
There are three others. One, let me just, I have it here. I think the things that I have three photos of them, so I'm not quite sure what they are. I think one of them, I'll try to see, but one of them, I think it's some sort of island in the Baja California Peninsula. It's probably related to marine. Types, and then there are two others. One looks like a really nice volcano, and it's something we
Yeah.
can it's it looks like in the north of Mexico, and then the other one more like a kind of swamp, like yeah, it looks like the Caribbean. So I'm not quite sure what they
Yeah.
are, but
Oh,
yeah,
I'll have a look and I'll post
yeah,
links up on the
excellent.
website.
That,
We you touched there before on the Day of the Dead.
mhm.
And that's just getting me thinking. Let's try and talk a little bit more about the Mexican culture now. So the Day of the tell us about the Day of the Dead. What when is it? What is it? And how
Mhm.
did it come about?
Perfect. Yes. So that's another very good excuse to go to Mexico in the low season, because the Day of the Dead is in October, end of October, beginning of November. So basically, it's on the 1st and the 2nd of November. We celebrate Day of the Dead. So it's a tradition that comes originally from the center of Mexico, so that area that I mentioned before. Michoacan and other places as well. Very popular in other states in Mexico as well. So it's a celebration of the people that you within your family that have passed away, and it's a celebration where you basically remember them. And people in Mexico. Well, I remember still when I was younger, we used to do at school or even at home, like altars with photos of the people who have left, and then we put whatever food or drinks they used to like, and it's just a way of celebrating them and just remembering and making sure that they are um, within us, even if they're not physically present anymore. So yeah, that is basically the idea behind all this, and it's becoming very popular now. It's becoming very joyous and very festive, which is also a good thing. I think it's another expression of what it really means, and just a way of remembering
I
the
suppose the more it's the more if it's become more of a festival in recent years, maybe it helps to keep that tradition alive and almost protects and preserves the cultural aspect of that, which I think is fantastic.
yeah,
I think it's a wonderful festival. It was brought to my attention by obviously by my daughters, who there's a Disney film or something, Coco.
yeah,
Maybe
Coco,
you're
yes,
familiar with it. And I saw that, and I was a few tears towards the end, but wonderful. I love the whole concept of it.
yeah,
And I love the fact that there is it's this celebration of the people that have gone before, not a mourning, but a
exactly,
celebration and a remembering them fondly. I think that's fantastic. Are there any
exactly.
other sort of festivals or ceremonies that we should be aware of?
Yeah, so yeah, very very interesting. So events are a big attraction in Mexico. Of course, there's a huge a number of all sorts of events. From sports to culture and food and everything. It will be very very difficult. Actually, yesterday I was trying to find like a calendar. It's really difficult. But yeah, some of the most important probably is. Day of the Dead, of course, in beginning of November. You have the carnivals in February, like in many other countries as well, which are quite interesting in different parts of the country, especially in the East Coast, in the state of Veracruz. Really, really important. You have one that I really, really like, and I think it's probably going to be one of the most popular in the next few years. I guess it's becoming really, really popular, at least in Mexico. It's called the Guelaguetza, which is in the state of Oaxaca, which is in the south, south of the country. Beautiful state with a really, really nice gastronomy and culture. They have this festival that um, basically it's all related to offerings between the community. So there are different communities in Oaxaca, and between them, they offer. It's all this idea of offering things that you have to other people in your community, and it's a very beautiful, very colorful festival, and very rising in popularity in Mexico, and I'm pretty sure internationally soon, hopefully.
I love that. I lyou
Yeah.
you talked there just briefly. You mentioned as well. you mentioned about different foods as well, and that again interests me because whilst I've never been to Mexico, um, I will claim very, very loosely that I've had Mexican food, because obviously, we can get Mexican food here in the UK. Now, when you have Chinese food in the UK or Indian food in the UK, it's sometimes it's very different to the food when you actually go to those different countries. Have I, in all likelihood, have I had Mexican food? What's the real Mexican cuisine like? I'm guessing it's very different from the Mexican food that we have here
Um,
in the UK.
Well, I have to say that in the UK in particular, there's quite good expression of Mexican food
Yeah.
compared
Oh,
to other
good.
countries. Yeah. Actually, I have to say, in London, probably I've tasted one of the best. I really like one dish that is called cochinita pibil, and I have to be honest. In London, I tried one that was one of the best I've tried, and it
Oh,
was
really?
yeah,
What's
really. It
the
was,
name of that dish?
it's called cochinita pibil. That comes from the state of Yucatan, and it's pork with some sort of seasoning. I don't know exactly what seasoning that is, but it's a really popular. And I think the reason is because the pork in the UK is really, really lean and really
Yeah.
nice. So it was really good.
Oh, very
But,
good. Very good.
yeah, but yeah, definitely in Mexico, there's well, as I mentioned at the beginning, there are 32 states in Mexico. And I would say that each one of those 32 states has their own cuisine,
Yeah.
which makes a lot of different types of food. So I would say there's not one Mexican cuisine. There are probably not even 32. There's a lot of regional cuisines. That I think, in essence, is what makes Mexican food really rich. Um, so yeah, there's obviously a lot of seafood on the coasts, a lot of vegetables, ingredients that are endemic from Mexico, different fruits that come from there. Like, for example, there's one that I really like called mamey, which is difficult to describe. It's a really tasty kind of orange
Oh, wow.
papaya or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, many different ingredients basically, and yeah, I think that's what makes Mexican food interesting: the diversity, and then the use of very fresh and local ingredients. And then there's obviously more recently or a tendency uh, from Mexican chefs to kind of in reinterpretation of very traditional dishes. So that makes really interesting um, restaurant scene in Mexico, Mexican cities and Mexican towns. Yeah,
Very
really
good.
interesting. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. One of the final things, I'm sort of getting conscious of time. One of the finals we can't not discuss Mexico, and cover off cultural heritage,
Mhm.
because Mexico is probably one of the destinations in the world that has got the richest cultural heritage, um, of modern civilization. Really, you have these, this sort of former Mayan culture, along with all of the temples. Tell us a little bit about the cultural heritage aspect of Mexico.
Mm. Yes, I think it's quite similar to gastronomy. It's a
Yep.
very very diverse country. So we have 62 different ethnic groups in Mexico. I think something like 30 different languages. Even though Spanish is the official one, there are many other ones that are very much
Right.
alive,
Yeah.
like Mayan. It's not called Mayan. There are different names,
Yeah.
or very different languages that are spoken. So yeah, it's a really I would say Mexico, as in all the aspects of Mexico, it's a very diverse, very mixed kind of in case of culture, very it's a mix of many heritages. Obviously, the indigenous one with mixed with Spanish. Then you have other cultures that have come to Mexico, like Lebanese or they really a lot of different places. So yeah, it's very interesting. But I would say that when you go to Mexico, that's probably one of the most striking things that the diversity of cultures. It's like yeah, you have
But
a lot of
you've
things.
just got one of the richest histories around. I mean, I was reading somewhere that some of the I think that in terms of the number of ancient pyramids that you have is greater than anywhere else. Everybody always sort of talks about the Great Pyramids of Giza, but actually there's far more pyramids in Mexico than there is in Egypt. Was my understanding? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, we have 40,000 archaeological sites.
Yeah,
Yeah, from the really, really big ones and very well in very good state
preserved.
of
Yeah.
conservation, preserved
Mm.
exactly, to other which are actually quite interesting. Some archaeological sites that are probably not even open to the public, and which are quite interesting if you get to get to those. And yeah, it's quite interesting. Not only in the south. In the south, there's a big concentration of archaeological sites, but also in the north, in the desert,
Hmm.
near the border, you have other ethnic groups that were there and who are still there, and there's there's a footprint of all that
Yeah.
heritage there. Yeah.
Fascinating. I really am looking forward to getting over to Mexico, hopefully later this year for the Tianguis Fair, and actually sort of immersing myself a little bit more into this, and certainly educating myself a little bit more, because I definitely need to. In terms of recommending an itinerary for a first-time traveler, anybody listening to this podcast and thinking, look, actually, yes, I really do fancy, trying Mexico and going over for maybe for 2 weeks. What kind of a loose itinerary would you recommend for people for two
Yeah.
weeks, just broadly
Well,
speaking?
there are many, but generally speaking, I would recommend. Well, one, it's especially for the low season traveler.
Yep.
In Mexico, the Easter period is when Mexicans travel the most. So basically, it's when the beaches are more busier and everything. So what I would recommend probably is to go, especially to Mexico City in the Easter when everyone is away. So that makes Mexico City really, really pleasant place to be. Really beautiful.
That's a great tip.
Yes, and especially Mexico City in the Easter, you have is the season of a really beautiful tree called jacaranda, which
Yes.
is like cherry blossom, like the Japanese cherry blossom. We
Yeah.
have in Mexico the jacaranda blossom. So the city basically is blue skies, no one there, and all pink with the
Wonderful.
like, so probably Mexico City in Easter when it's empty, and then as soon as people come back to Mexico City, go on the against the flow to a beach destination. In beach destination, I would definitely recommend Riviera Nayarit, which I obviously represent in the UK. But it's true. It's
Yeah.
true. It's for a traveler, especially for those who have already been to the Caribbean coast, who know quite well that area, the Yucatan Peninsula. The Riviera Nayarit is really a really good option for on the Pacific coast for really relaxing a holiday in the Pacific coast.
Love it.
So
What
yeah, that
about
would be
in terms of places to stay in Riviera Nayarit? Is there
yeah,
anywhere that you particularly recommend that's a really, really good place to stay for people? And the
yeah.
same in Mexico City, actually. Where would you recommend that people would stay?
Yes. Well, starting in Mexico City, let's say if people fly in from the UK, but there are many direct flights to Mexico City, so probably flying into Mexico City and then staying, I would say, three different areas that are really practical and interesting. One is in the south of Mexico, in areas like Coyoacan or San Angel, where definitely you have a lot of things to do and then very good accommodation, connectivity, and everything. Another option is probably for younger tourists, an area called Condesa or Roma, which is more like kind of yeah,
Young and hip kind of vibe.
yeah, exactly,
It's
exactly.
probably not going to suit me, is it? I'm probably too old for
I'm sure it
that.
will. I'm sure it will. There are really, really nice areas there. And then another one is like like the upscale kind of area of Mexico City called Polanco, which is also really interesting, more so there are a lot of parks, and so any of these three areas I would recommend, and there are many others, of course, but these are kind of the easiest ones. Then traveling to Riviera Nayarit, direct flights from Mexico City, or obviously by road or by bus, as we mentioned before. The Riviera Nayarit, so basically it's a very, very long coast on the Pacific, on the central Pacific coast. Is 300 kilometers of coast with 23 micro destinations. It's very close to a quite popular resort called Puerto Vallarta, which actually probably many people know already. There are direct flights from the UK to Puerto Vallarta. So Riviera Nayarit is basically the region that is north, immediately north of Puerto Vallarta, in the state of Nayarit. That's why it is called Riviera Nayarit. So 300 kilometers of coast, 23 micro destinations, and within those 23 micro destinations, there are all sorts of holiday types. So basically, you have from really large sandy beaches with very, very luxurious hotels. We have five diamond triple A 5-diamond hotels and boutique hotels, really, really large options. And then so basically many options. And then you have all these towns, fishermen towns with a very good character, where actually this area, basically the very attractive side of this area is that many of the tourists that go there are from international tourists that go there are part-time residents. So it really feels like a very immersive kind of region where not that touristy. Actually, it feels really like people live there, and many of them speak Spanish. They are very everyone is integrated. I think it's a good example of slow travel that is very popular at the moment.
It sounds absolutely perfect for our audience. Low season travelers. That's what we look for. We look to try and avoid the crowds, but also we look to to meet with the locals and to mix with the locals, so that we can really get under the skin of that destination and feel like we're really starting to understand the destination through interactions with local people. It sounds absolutely perfect. Polo, sadly, our time is up. But I've really, really enjoyed learning from you a little bit more about Mexico. I am, of course, super excited now to hopefully being in Mexico in September for the Tianguis. And I'm hoping to do a pre or a post tour, and I will definitely sign up for, if there's one to Riviera Nayarit, I'll definitely be signing up for it. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you spending the time with us.
Thank you.
So there you have it. Huge thanks to Polo for giving us his time this week. I'm now super excited to visit Mexico later this year, and I hope it's whetted your appetite too. That's all for this week's show. We're back again next week as we head over to Antigua to learn more about the community charity which we'll be supporting this year. If you haven't already done so, please do sign up to receive our latest updates on lowseasontraveller.com, and then you'll be among the first to experience the world's first low-season dedicated travel website, perfect for inspiration as we wait and dream of future travels. Have a great week, stay healthy, stay safe, stay home, and don't forget to share this podcast with your friends, family, and social networks. Our content will always be free for everyone, as we believe that travel is better without the crowds.